Thanks very much, everybody. Great to be here at the festival. Hope you've been having a good time. You know, as mentioned, I'm Etan Horowitz, work at Google, working with publishers and newsrooms to help them figure out how to take advantage of different AI tools and technologies. So we have a really great panel today with 3 leaders that offer diverse perspectives on this topic. So they come from 3 different types of organizations, 3 different countries, so really excited for that. I'm going to introduce the panel. First, we have Athandiwe Saba, who is the AI Newsroom Initiative Lead for Code for Africa, based in South Africa. And then, yep, feel free to applause individually or at the end, up to you, but they're all well-deserving of the applause. Then Alexandra Borchardt, who is an independent researcher and advisor based in Germany. And then finally, we have Erica Osher, who is the Vice President of AI Labs at NPR in the United States. So what we're going to do, basically, each panelist is going to run through a few quick slides, presentation, just sort of sharing their own perspective on this topic of AI adoption, you know, in their organization, in their work. So after these 3 short presentations, we'll come back. I'll have a few questions for the panel, and then certainly definitely going to leave some time for audience questions as well. So first up, Athandiwe.
Awesome. Good morning, everybody. It's super awesome to be at the JournalismAI conference. So I'm Athandiwe. I'm from an organization called Code for Africa. I do want to briefly introduce Code for Africa for those who haven't worked with it. Well, firstly, myself, journalism background, worked in newsrooms across in South Africa, started AI data desks within some of those newsrooms in South Africa, then moved to Code for Africa. Code for Africa, I've been with them close to 3 years now. I run the iLab, firstly, which is Africa's biggest OSINT investigation unit. And we look into disinformation, misinformation, we look into manipulated information across 26 different African countries. And a lot of the work that my team does and continues to, does within the iLab is focused on, as I said, disinformation. However, a lot of the tools that we use and we have been using are around AI. A lot of the way that we we'll look into social media and using OSINT tools, all of that is around AI. And that's when Code for Africa, we decided to focus a lot more on how do we take those tools into actual newsrooms. And now that we are working with newsrooms, when I think around artificial intelligence, I like to take a step back before going forward to help newsrooms begin to think about how to actually use it and how it's not just something that's new. I usually talk about the 3 disruptions that newsrooms have had to face as long as news has been around, and that was the internet. How did we engage with that? How did newsrooms change? And then we had social media. Social media brought us a whole new illusion about and disrupted us so much. It showed us that how engagement works and actually talking to people, but also our distribution networks as well. And now we have this new force that is changing how truth is actually produced and perceived and engaged with. And newsrooms need to understand those 3 disruptions and where news fit in each and every single one of those disruptive elements, those disruptive waves. How we like to start with the newsroom, I'm big on actually having a problem first around AI. If you don't have a problem and you are using tools, you are probably adding a lot more pressure on your newsrooms, spending money that you shouldn't be spending. And if you think about the 3 disruptions that we've already been through as news, you have to think, what is the problem first? And I think during the data journalism phase of our disruption, there had to be a problem that you were trying to solve there. And once you have identified the problem, you also have to have quite a focused collaboration strategy, not just collaboration for the sake of collaboration, actual tangible collaboration. Journalists, of course, can't do everything. We can't report and write code and then verify and design. So how do we collaborate? And in Africa, if I can, as a continent, some of the newsrooms that I've worked with, they have newsrooms that have 3 people in them. They have newsrooms that have 10 people in them. And so it's not a sense of we can just figure out our problem, find an AI solution for it, and then go and implement it. They have to figure out where they're going to get the resources from for such a small unit. And collaboration becomes quite important. A lot of the work that we've done with Code for Africa is to collaborate with CSOs, is to collaborate with the tech sector, is to collaborate. There's a lot of work that we've been doing as well with the University of Pretoria, their data science units as well there. Thinking around language issues, because there's a lot of language issues when we are doing disinformation tracking. As Africa has so many different languages, if we're working in Mali, for instance, how are we able to track disinformation in Bambara? That needs artificial intelligence, and we can tap into a lot of the AI solutions, natural language processing solutions that universities are already working with. The third step, beyond collaboration, is the actual planning that needs to happen. And a lot of newsrooms, with resource constraints as well, they think you just kind of throw out the tools out there and see kind of what sticks. No, you have to plan and you have to test and you have to learn from that. So I'm quite kind of pedantic about frameworks and strategies and planning and all of that, and writing all of this down. That's quite important. And a lot of these newsrooms, as I said, quite small, they don't have those kind of processes in place, and we see how we can assist those, also using AI tools to see how they can monitor what their tests are looking like. They've defined the problem, they pick one of the many tools, they interrogate those tools as well. We need to test for a certain number of days or a certain number of weeks, and to see what then we are getting back from that. And whether it's a failure or whether it's a success, we are learning from that. Of course, we need to stick to our core principal values. Yes, we have AI frameworks and all of that, but our core principal values for journalism, in the media industry particularly, we're talking about transparency and accuracy and telling the audience that we're working with that this has been produced using AI, or this is a particular tool that we are using and this is how we've interrogated that as well. That's quite important in the small newsrooms that we do work with as well. And accountability is quite important as well. And that is rebuilding that kind of truth with our audiences as well. And this is basically a list of some of the resources that we work with. One of them that we have built within Code for Africa is called Feed Shield, where we assist investigative journalists, where they have been coordinated online attacks on their work, and we've built that particular tool to kind of get what their problems are and assist in tracking down some of those coordinated networks that do attack some of their work. And this will be available for, the slides will be available to come and check some of those resources as well.
Yeah, hello everybody, and I'm really glad to be here. Start with a problem. Brilliant advice, you know, there's so many, that's what I keep hearing again and again. There are like solutions being developed for problems that don't exist. Whoops, let's get further on here. Yeah, I'm an independent researcher with about 30 years of newsroom experience. And today I'm going to present you some results from an EBU news report I did on AI, leading newsrooms in the age of generative AI. It's actually the second big report. The first one, Trusted Journalism in the Age of Generative AI, I did with a few colleagues, and there were some lessons to be learned from that first to the second report, because in the first report it was all about experimentation, getting actually people to raise their appetites to do something with AI. But then we are much further ahead now, and newsrooms have actually become more strategic about the use of AI and also more realistic. And in the second report, the emphasis of the research was actually, how do you actually bring the newsroom along? What do audiences think? Because there's a lot more research out there on audience, what audiences think now, and all these reports have lots of interesting use cases. And let me throw some thoughts at you that were, some thoughts we had from the research I've done. First of all, it's really important to map your stakeholders. So it really makes a lot of sense to figure out, who are you building the tools for? Who are you addressing when you want to bring people along? And Kasper Linsko, who's from the JP Political Media Group in Denmark, he said, we don't build the tools for the front runners who are going to do everything anyway. And also those who resist, it's not necessarily those we are addressing. And actually, as a change management coach, I always advise people, don't really spend all your energy on convincing those who resist, but really go with those who are willing to change. And he says, what we are doing is actually building tools that really fit that middle group of those who are interested but not, super interested. So address the majority. Second thing is, make work easier, and you find some use cases in the report. I just pulled out two. Actually, one isn't even in that report. For example, if you have the user needs approach, and you want to give people a lot more ideas, want them to be more creative on different story angles, there is something that the Swiss public broadcaster RTS pulled out, the story angle generator, and it was so convincing that other news organizations adopted it as well. And the second example is from Bayerischer Rundfunk in Germany. I work out of Munich, so I'm very close to them. And that is about moderating comments. And I mean, lots of people in newsrooms don't really like doing that work. So it's really, if you make work easier, it's more important. And actually, last week I attended a conference of the European Federation of Journalists, the journalist unions, and they said, actually, with AI, it's not as much, reluctance of people adopting stuff, because it makes work easier for some people, particularly in stuff that they really don't like doing. Yeah, next is, don't make it too easy. That sounds maybe counterintuitive, but what Jiri Kivimäki from Yle, the Finnish public broadcaster, found out is if you make it too easy and people just press a button, then not only will they never learn and understand how these different models work, because you want people to understand how the different models work, but you're actually doing the same thing that you accuse tech companies of doing, provide all these black boxes. So make it a bit challenging and actually research about creativity. And I also interviewed a professor from MIT Media Lab about this. Research about creativity actually shows don't make these systems so easy that they tempt you to just offload work. You can actually build systems that make people think a little bit more and make them consider what they are doing. And this is really keeping people on their toes and becoming that they are aware of what they're doing is really something important. Then, and here you meet her again, Uli Köppen, who spoke here yesterday. She said, what's really important is provide clear guidance to your newsroom. And they've been in that space for quite a while, and then they felt we're going to come up with a list of questions, and people can handle that themselves. They can ask themselves some questions. How do I go from here to there? But then, people came back to her and said, no, we don't really want that. We don't want to be super empowered. We just want clear rules, because people are actually so confused. Also, they have other things to do. So they don't want to think too much about every single step they're taking. And as we also learned yesterday, people don't read the guidelines. I think Uli said that, so they don't read them. So, provide clear guidelines so that people actually know what they can do, what they can't do, what they're not supposed to do. Ideally, you put it in the systems. And And what I found also really important, and that's the final quote I'll pull out here, invest in humans. Invest in your journalism. I recently was at a conference with the CEO of Le Monde, and they said they really invested in their newsroom because all we need to do is invest in your journalism, in our journalism, because we want to survive in that age of AI. And that also means invest in human connections, because you really need to own your audiences. And this is Laura Ellis from the BBC, who said, you know, there's a slight danger that if we automate everything, we don't have anyone in the newsroom who speaks the voice of the audience any longer and who can't build that connection. And we heard that also, you know, people picking up phones and really talking to real people. This will be so essential and important in the AI age. So summing up, 5 to-dos, and actually I start with 7, and then I thought we'll run out of time, so I just reduced this to 5, but you can probably come up with 10. So I'll reduce this to 5. Explain your strategy. Actually have a strategy. This is really important. Don't just do everything. Start with the problem to link it to your input. Have one, and particularly the why. People want to know why they have to use certain tools, why the strategy is like that, and they'll be much easier in the transformation. They'll handle that much better if they know the why. Then map your stakeholders and also acknowledge fears. Don't give people this feeling like, you know, they're out of line if they're not super interested. I mean, there are so many different talents and competencies, and we learned yesterday, you know, the attitude matters, the flexibility matters. So really, really acknowledge that people are afraid of losing their jobs. There's no way of denying that. It's just there. And I mean, there are lots of roles in newsrooms where there's influence and privilege attached to that, and standing of people. So there are fears of losing all of that. So address that. Yeah. Then make it useful and easy to use, but not too easy. You don't want to really suppress the creativity in people, so really keep them on their toes and really, yeah, take advantage of the creative spirit, because what's clear is AI can make you a lot more creative if you want to be creative. If you just want to offload work, it might also work. So really don't make it too easy. Number 4, and that's the Uli Köppen thing, define the rules, the boundaries, but also the expectations. You have to make it pretty clear what you expect from your newsroom and you know, what you don't expect also. People like that. They like to have a clear definition of expectations. And then last, invest in your journalism and in human connections, because this is what matters in the AI age. And yeah, thank you so much, and I'll hand over.
Hi, so I'm Erica Osher. I head up AI Labs for NPR. NPR is the based in the public radio system in the US. We are the national content provider for that system, and we have 244 member stations that are independent. So we don't own our stations. That's a big misconception around NPR. But we are partners with them. And those stations range from everywhere from a few employees to hundreds of employees. So we have a pretty broad network that we're working with across the system. And when we think about AI, you know, NPR's biggest value, the biggest thing that we have, it's not our size, it's not our budgets, it's the trust. And we have spent decades building trust with audiences and building that core, deep, super fan relationships with our audiences. And so when we think about AI, everything that we do is through that lens. And so making sure that we can continue to innovate, that we can be you know, using this technology, but never compromising the core pieces of our journalism. And so this statement here is from our ethics handbook, written by our standards and practices managing editor, that really kind of just reinforces that our work will always be human-based, human-centered, human-reviewed. You know, we're not going to be releasing things with AI that haven't been looked at by journalists. And the way that we're going to be thinking about AI is always in the lens of our mission, which is to create a more informed public and to advance creativity and to really let our journalists shine in the work that they do and the skills that they have and make their jobs a little bit easier and make them be able to have more reach. So that's kind of how we've been approaching it. And so I don't know that I have like a playbook really here. I think for us it's been just very much a journey because I think we're all still learning. I've been only in my role full-time for the last 3 months. I was doing it part-time for 7 months before that, and then as part of a committee for 2 years before that. So, but I want to talk to you about our journey and where we are now. And we've been a little bit slower than some of the other folks that you've heard from. I think because of our scale and because of our reputation, we've been very cautious, but we've also been learning a lot. So we started like 2 years ago with guidelines and with both on the code of conduct side for the full organization, because in journalism organizations, it's not just newsrooms, you also have lots of business people and operations people that you're working with. So we wanted to make sure that everybody knew what the rules were. And then we also came up with the ethics handbook piece that is specific to our journalism. We did that very collaboratively. We did that through lots of internal conversations with different stakeholders. And then we formed this cross-functional initial AI Labs group, which represented content, revenue, product and technology, and policy. And what we decided to do was we wanted to hear from our staff and from our stations. And so we did a survey, a call out to get pilot suggestions. And we received a huge number of suggestions. And we initially thought we were going to kind of pick a few very specific ideas that we heard from. But what we noticed was these patterns came out. And I'll talk about that in just a second. And so what we actually ended up doing was creating 4 different groups for our pilots, with 6 different pilots within those groups. We've also done a lot of audience research, which I'll talk about a little bit too. We've been doing that over the last year, including the BBC EBU News Integrity Study. And now we're in this place of rolling out enterprise tooling. And we've been taking very much the enterprise approach to AI versus building a lot of bespoke tools based on our resources and also making sure that it works into our existing workflows. So if we hear one complaint, it's when, oh God, I don't want to use this other thing. So our approach has been very much like, what are we already using? What's already in our workflows? And then where do we want to add AI to that? And so that's been a big part of our focus is how to do that safely in every part of the organization, the newsroom, but also, our business teams as well and our operations team. And we're working through constantly kind of upgrading training, redoing training, thinking about training, especially as we do our enterprise rollouts. And then also just like collaborating across our network. And what you've heard a lot today is like these small newsrooms, and we have so many of them in our network, are doing really incredible things. And a lot of times they're moving so much faster than we are because they don't have the same level of bureaucracy and because they have this need and this desire to move and innovate quickly. And so there's so much that we can learn from them as a national organization, and I think it's our role to kind of help foster sharing of the ideas. So that's a big process for us over the next year is to really help host those conversations rather than just leading the conversations. So the 4 pilots that we did that I wanted to share were around journalism tooling, so like transcriptions, and then transcribing and tagging public meetings, and we did that with our stations, with several stations. Metadata, which is obviously the big thing that everybody's been talking about, and figuring out how we want to use AI to clean our very complicated data systems that we have. Accessibility, so translations and transcriptions that we also did. Testing of like how accurate that was, because we use mostly human transcriptions still today, and figuring out like what's good enough. And where is AI actually going to save us time? And then also the business side. So where we can be a little bit more creative, where we can use some of the more creative kind of like standard generative AI tooling with less risk. Like where do we want to use this for fundraising? Where do we want to use this for sponsorship? And all those tools as well. I want to talk a little bit about the research effort that we've been doing on the side. So we've done a lot of internal, obviously, we did a lot of internal kind of things with the pilot call outs, but we also really wanted to hear from our audience. Because I think a lot of us assume what our audience might think about different things that we do, but we're usually wrong. And we usually, have our own opinions of ourselves and how they see us and what they're interested in. And you've seen kind of some of the gaps that I've seen in like the, some of the digital news reports about like, oh, everybody wants a chatbot, do they? I don't know. So we started with both an interview-based process where we interviewed 11 like super users and then 7 non-users. With in-depth conversations. We did a survey of 300 audience members. And we learned a lot from this. We learned that our audience is okay with us using this to do our work and to help with our journalism. They're not okay with us using it for voices. They're not okay with us using it like replacing the people at the heart of what we do. And they are a little bit more conservative than your standard news consumers. So we have to be very cautious with our approach based on that audience research. We participated in that news integrity study led by the BBC and the EBU, which was really fantastic, and also very informative to see not just how we're seeing our own tools, but also how are people consuming our content through these chatbots, and what are the things that we have to be aware of in our business conversations with these technology companies, and then how does that inform our own processes? And so the preview of that is that there was huge gaps in accuracy in sourcing that was seen across the board. And so there's a lot of work to do, and I think that's really informative for us about how do we maintain our core value proposition and make sure, and our core mission of making sure that accurate information is reaching the public when we're being disintermediated by technology companies and by chatbots. So I think what you're hearing from me is that we're taking much more of a broad kind of systems approach to this work. And not just focusing only on Newsroom, which is hugely important, but also the core business and the audience, and being trying to be really audience first with our thought process. And then we've also done a lot of competitive research, which has been really helpful. And there's so many brilliant people that we've heard from here that are really inspiring to us. And it's great to be able to also learn from the mistakes that people have made and the things that didn't work, so that we didn't have to go through that and use those resources, but also to see what has worked and where we want to invest our resources and time. So like I said, we've done a lot of enterprise tooling. So here's just a subset of the tools that we've approved for people across the board to look at everything from summarizing our research for the audience teams, using Figma to generate prototypes, starting to play with Salesforce. And the big, using Olama was one of the first things that we started to do with very small teams within our journalism teams to let them test locally in very safe environments. And the thing that we're really trying to do with this is make sure, I want to give people as much flexibility to test as much as they want to do in a way that is safe, that meets our privacy restrictions and our policies, that we can also know about and be protecting them and ourselves, right? So there's a lot of data about shadow AI usage. And that 90% of people at companies are using their personal accounts to use AI and putting a bunch of proprietary information in that, which creates huge risks. So rather than policing that, I want to, the goal that we're trying to do is enable it and say, here's where you can play. Here's where you can find your use cases, because I don't know your use cases. Who am I to say what different people need? But here's where I can give you a safe space where you can do things and you can experiment and you can learn. And so that's where we're at now. And so the biggest thing that we're doing there is this Gemini rollout. We're using Gemini Enterprise within Workspace. We already use Workspace very heavily as an organization. We're moving more in that direction than some of the other competitors. It's inside our existing workflows. And we started with pilots, both with our executives, their designees as managers, and then also union reps, which was really important. We really want to keep our unions with us as much as possible. That's never going to be perfect. There's always going to still be stress and anxiety, but trying to keep them in the loop. We have a SAG-AFTRA working group that we're working with, and so we're trying to figure things out with them. And then we got the business teams going, because that was easier, a little bit safer. We got it enabled for all of them, and then we set up the editorial teams that are foundational to the work. So our content operations team, our editorial training team, our standards and practices team, because those are the folks who can really help us inform what the rollout is to the rest of the department and who are going to be leading that rollout. I'm not, as the person reporting to our chief operating officer, the right person to necessarily lead the training for the editorial teams. So getting them empowered and knowledgeable. And so now what we're working on is getting towards this content rollout for the full organization. And the last thing I want to talk about, which we haven't talked a lot about here, is Code Assist. There's been a lot of data about whether or not Code Assist is effective and whether or not the ROI is there. And if you're hearing anything from us, it's we're very ROI focused and making sure I don't want really expensive cloud costs to start ballooning, right? It can get really expensive with APIs very, very quickly if you're not careful. And so what we've started to do is we had this amazing group of people from engineering management, IT security, and DevOps worked together to create a pilot to really test, and we're in this right now, to test the effectiveness of AI code assist with different models. And they did such an incredible job defining success metrics, working with the teams. They're looking at qualitative and quantitative approach to that so that we can make sure that, like, does this actually save them time? Or do they have to spend more time reviewing the AI code and then that's actually not useful? So with everything we're doing, kind of just taking that slow, metrics-based approach to our rollout. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Round of applause for the presentation. No, I mean, that's great. You can hear three sort of different organizations, a lot of commonalities in there. And I'm going to ask a question or two to the panel, and then definitely we'll open up. So one of the things, Alexandra, I know you mentioned in talking about change management, you talk about going with the majority, and that's sort of what I was curious about from all of you, just in thinking about, resistance or skeptics, like if there's something, sometimes the skeptic might be the minority, but they're important, or they're a louder voice. So just curious, to all three panelists, like if there's anything that you've dealt with that you're able to share that sort of worked, to help change somebody's mind or change management, or any sort of tips on that, because, as mentioned, as we've seen with the disruptions that you've mentioned, right? Like along the way, when we're bringing in, the internet or mobile or social, there's always, resistance or skepticism. So just sort of curious to hear some tips or lessons. So whomever wants to go for it. You want to start? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, if you go with the change management playbook, then it's really start with the willing and produce success stories, and also things that make life easier for people. And as I said before, don't waste that much energy on convincing those who resist. But my experience is also, it's a huge communication challenge, actually, because, I mean, here, everyone in this room is super smart about AI, and the same people meet at the same conferences and share their knowledge. And so even I have the impression, like, oh, all these organizations are really so capable and so much at the forefront. Particularly for the second report, I basically interviewed AI directors. But then you talk to people from the same organization in a different setting, and they say, oh, I don't know if we're actually doing something with AI in our organization. And I'm like, yes, you do. You have this really brilliant. So really, it's that communication thing that you really need to sort of, you need to bring the message, get the message across, say it again and again and again, the why are you using AI, make sure it gets to all parts of the organizations, also to the foreign correspondents and whatever people in the field who just don't necessarily are concerned with this, and include them in the conversation. And that would be my advice.
So communication, any other thoughts on skeptics, on resistance, like what you've...
Definitely communication. I would definitely agree with communication. But to take it a step further as well, taking people along in the journey. Whether you are a newsroom of 3 people or you're a newsroom of 300 people, taking your team along the journey and helping them understand why this is important, because you'll find that, well, we've found that in a lot of the newsrooms that we've worked with, people are still kind of stuck with what happened with social media. Social media platforms took the distribution rights from newsrooms. Journalists felt like these big large language models, big tech is just taking. How do we explain that to them? That actually we still have to engage with this new disruption, and how do we do that? And having those, as I said, I'm big on guidelines and protocols and processes, but assisting them to think through those steps, that's quite important, so that they feel more comfortable in innovating in their newsrooms, and then testing out, post-testing out, how does that impact then your newsroom? How does that newsroom grow? How does that newsroom feed into your communities? Whether we're working with local radio stations, and you'll find that radio stations are still quite big in Africa as one way of putting out information. How then do they engage with their communities as well? Take your newsroom along on this journey, the learning, the unpacking, the understanding, the building of their own guidelines, the building of their own processes, especially with newsrooms that don't have the financial muscle to have all these different layers that are thinking for them. The journalist is still the one that needs to figure out the guidelines. The journalist is still the one that needs to say, okay, my community that I'm writing for, that I'm doing the radio story for, this is what we're using. They need to understand what we're doing in these processes as well. So communication and that journey, it's all together. It has to happen together.
I think the only things I would add to that, I think everything that both of you said is totally right, is that you're not totally going to get this right. Like, people are still going to be scared. And there are some people who have very core, deep feelings about artificial intelligence that are totally valid. I have some of those feelings. I think most of us in this room have some of those feelings about this, the environmental concerns, like, all of those things are valid, all of those things are real. And so I think being humble and being open to people's feedback, hearing them out and their concerns, even when it's difficult, understanding that their frustration isn't about you as the AI leader, but it's about like their existential fears about this technology and what that means for them and our society. Not hyping, I think, is really important. So like when I do demos of things like Gemini, I really try to like not, like also talk about where I think it works really well, but also talk about like the things that I don't like about it and where I think it doesn't work that well yet. Because I think people need to hear like that it's not perfect. And there's a reason that we're thinking about AI as the hands, but not as the heads. Like we are the people are the heads, they're the brains, they're the ones who are doing that work. And this is just additional tools. And I think the more that we can kind of reemphasize the tooling piece of it, the better it is. But again, like that's not gonna please everybody, and that's okay.
Great. And then final one before we go to audience questions, I'm just curious, you know, from the panel, from your AI journeys or in the research as well, if there's something that you're really proud of, you know, even a small win, a tool, a process, or if not, an insight, something that you've learned. Maybe we can start with Erica again. Yeah.
I'm really happy that I think there's a couple things. I think I'm really pleased with the research that we've had and being able to participate in several different research and the amazing people across the division, across our company who did that work, and being able to really understand kind of where our audience is coming from, being able to participate in things like the BBC EBU study, I think I've learned so much from that, and so I think that's been really important. I love user testing. I'm a product manager at my core, so like, the more that we can kind of continue to build on talking to our audience as we're going, I think is the biggest thing. And then the second thing is I'm really proud of how our engineering staff has looked at Code Assist and thought about it really incredibly thoughtfully. And with so much focus on security and transparency and research and success metrics, I think they've done an incredible job with that.
Great. Any from your research or others, small wins or things you're proud of or stories that stick with you?
Obviously, I'm not proud because, I mean, this is research, and research is so important, and I encourage everyone to really contribute. And I also think it's great to have that piece of research and advance on it. And we need a lot more research. What's puzzling to me, in particular, what I'm really chewing on is that creativity question. You might have guessed because I elaborated on that earlier. Because I also came across people who said like, oh, you know, I had, this is actually someone I spoke to, a newsroom editor in Malaysia, and she said like, you know, my three very best writers, I mean, they used to be really great writers, and now, I mean, they're under so much deadline pressure, they're now using ChatGPT, and I can tell because their writing quality has gone down. And I think that's really the thing that is so important, and we should be concerned about most. The quality of the journalism is really, really, really important if we want to survive this and we want to flourish, actually, and the human touch and how we can make people more creative in that, and you know, and actually deepening audience connections. And I think all the effort should go into that, because we really have to do our homework and to really show what journalism is, what it's good for, what's unique about it. And every news organization has to figure that out for their particular organization. What are your special qualities? What makes you unique? And what can you really invest in? And that is something that I feel very strongly about.
Creativity, and then
I think on my end, I work a lot in the disinformation space, information manipulation space across the continent. So that's quite a big thing for the team I work with and the newsrooms that we try to train in open source investigations. And I think from my end, the team that I work with, the iLab team, being able to build dashboards to look and track the bad actors across West Africa, across East Africa. We're looking quite a lot at the Southern Africa now, but in West Africa, we are able to pinpoint particular accounts, particular actors that are spreading disinformation. For instance, what's currently happening in Sudan and refugees, we are able to find from our lexicons, connecting back to lexicons and our watch list, the same kind of actors coming up and pushing the similar kind of disinformation in Sudan right now. And that complicates a lot of the initiatives that are meant to be happening in such spaces. So whether it's election dashboards that we are able to connect to the 5 to 7 years work that we've done so that that doesn't get lost. So being able to create those dashboards and allowing newsrooms to engage with us about what they're looking for, how do we make the connections as well, is something that I'm quite proud of that our team has been able to build for internal use, but we do assist newsrooms across the continent with that information as well.
Great, thank you. So we've got about 5 minutes. If you have a question, I think folks have microphones. Stand up, raise your hand. If you can, say who you are, where you're from, if you want to address. Yeah. I also have a question from the live stream. Okay, go ahead.
Can I go? Thank you very much. My name is Connie Taja. I'm from the Debrief Network in South Africa. I just wanted to ask about thinking, right? We heard a lot over the last day and a half about, a transmedia strategy, like one big good piece of journalism that gets disseminated into like nuggets, right? So does it start at the right? Like should perhaps maybe the writing be the core of it, and then AI tools used to then cut it up, or the reverse? A social video and then that becomes text. Have you thought about where does the premium start, and then where does AI kind of cut up that premium journalism? Am I making sense?
No, I know exactly what you're talking about, because some of the newsrooms that we've worked with do ask those questions. But I would go back to who is your audience? What are they looking for? Because if we start off with, okay, I want this great piece of journalism to speak to everybody. Is everybody your audience? Are the people on TikTok the same audience you have on LinkedIn? Are we just trying to consistently feed the beast, and we're just allowing AI to assist us doing that? So in your thinking, is your audience people who actually enjoy the long form? They want to sit down, they want to scroll through all this amazing work that you've done. And if that is your audience, that's what you focus first on. If your audience is the TikTok audience because you want the numbers on that particular platform, then that is what you kind of focus on. For instance, with some of the radio newsrooms that we've worked with, we've presented to, we've engaged with, we start off, what is your problem? They want to get their audience that's listening in to engage with them on TikTok. So yes, you'd have your interview, and then they want to break that interview up into little short bits. TikTok then would be the first kind of ask AI to build this kind of TikTok video, or talk to the new trends on TikTok, or whatever you want to do. Then that would be your first port of call. But you have to understand, what is your problem? What are you trying to achieve first? And if you follow that kind of thinking and that kind of playbook, then you will know where to start first and how to best serve that particular audience for a particular outcome at the end of the day.
I'd love to add. We're thinking about it, and I think we don't have an answer yet. And I think the big thing is, obviously all of us are thinking about, so legacy rooms or newsrooms or legacy media companies are thinking about reach, and thinking about younger audiences. To everybody's point, and I think the thing is will it actually really save time while still meeting editorial standards? And we haven't yet been able to prove that out. We're looking at how to test that and figure that out. But if we're starting with a core piece of audio, right? A lot of our original reporting is audio. And then we're saying, okay, how can we take that core piece of audio and that core reporting that was done by humans and fully edited and went through full editorial review, and then use AI to help us distribute it? Is that the best way to do it? I don't know yet, because we haven't done the full end-to-end testing. We haven't built the systems to actually fully build that infrastructure. It's not just about like because it's so much more than just like the editing. It's so much more than just the rewriting. It's also like, where is it being posted? What's your API solution? What's your distribution infrastructure to get to all those channels? Like, how automated is those systems? And so I guess what I'm trying to ramble and I'm trying to get to is like thinking about this from a systems approach and then really testing those success metrics and really understanding the workflows to me, and not just saying like AI is definitely the answer to this. AI is a potential tool in that workflow.
I mean, oh, is there another question? I would add, like, better do something right and not do everything sort of part of right. So if we learned from The Atlantic this morning, their thing is long form storytelling, presenting their writers at the top of the game. This is the user need. That's why people read The Atlantic. It wouldn't make any sense to do just sort of some, news pieces about that. If you are a personal brand, you have that great podcast. Yes, currently podcasts are also a thing on YouTube, and you should do that, and also to do social video, but still the personality of the host is the thing. If it's just basic news, you might also switch among formats, but even, I mean, I spoke to the head of digital of Rappler from the Philippines, and she said, like, I mean, yes, we're transforming text into video because otherwise we won't reach younger audiences, but actually it's still a little bit shaky. It's not like the best video production. If you want to really do great video storytelling, you invest in that one and go the other way around. So it's really starting to think from your audience. It's really important.
We have some questions on the live stream, but you have already responded to them.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah, I think we're at time. We'll be around if you have questions, but thanks very much to our panel. Let's give a round of applause.